Okay, good evening, everybody. Honorable Commerce and Industry Minister, friends from the media, thank you very much for joining us here this evening for this press introduction of Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister has just concluded the official segment of his visit to Washington, D.C., a very intense 1.5 days, a little over 1.5 days, which has seen him holding extensive discussions with the U.S. Commerce Secretary here, Gina Raimondo, USTR, Catherine Tai, and several one-to-one meetings with individual CEOs, principally focused at investment and industry cooperation between India and the US. Prior to that, the minister also held extensive set of business meetings in New York. The way we have structured this evening's interaction is that I would request Honorable Minister to share his brief opening thoughts, whereafter we would open the floor for questions. When you ask questions, I know everybody knows everybody, but still it will be useful for the purposes of record to identify yourself in the organization that you represent and your question, please. Sir, if I could please request you to.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Mr. Rajesh Agarwal, Additional Secretary, Commerce Ministry. We have other colleagues, Himani Pandey, Additional Secretary in the Industries Department. Friends from the media. Truly delighted to be meeting all of you again, and very happy to have successfully concluded another successful visit to the United States of America, where I've engaged with the Commerce Secretary, Ms. Gina Raimondo, with the USTR, Ms. Catherine Tai, industry leaders from across various sectors, investment banks and large companies from the finance world, and the Indian diaspora and think tanks in the US. It's been a very engaging 4 days in the US, concluding with a successful commercial dialogue this morning, where we executed the MOU on critical minerals to keep the supply chains open and for greater engagement between the Ministry of Mines in India and the US government. One important element to note is that the Trade Policy Forum with the USTR, the commercial dialogue with Commerce Secretary, the India-USA CEO Forum, all these institutions are now regularly interacting with each other. There was a time that these were sporadic interactions. Many years would go by without any meetings. Now they are very outcome-oriented, with a focused agenda, and the periodicity has been made very regular. Another important aspect that I'd like to share with you is the number of high-level engagements in a short span of 1 month. The Honorable Prime Minister was here, the Honorable Defense Minister, Foreign Minister, and I have already been here. NSA came with the Prime Minister, and next week the Honorable Finance Minister will be here. Only to share with you that the US-India relationship is today transcending politics. We have worked with 3 administrations, Mr. Modi's tenure. We had Obama administration, Trump administration, and Biden administration. Therefore, both the United States at the highest level and India at the highest level, and at all levels, we are engaged regularly, and we are really finding that this relationship is only getting better and maturing from month to month. Just a small correction. The US NSA came to India. Our NSA had not come here. This was our 6th commercial dialogue, and building on last year's progress, the strategic discussions, including the critical minerals MOU, centered around resilient semiconductor supply chains. It veered around sustainability and clean energy in a big way. There was a lot of discussion to work with each other in newer areas, such as tourism, for example, and the innovation handshake that we had announced earlier, about a year ago, has now been taken forward with technology and sustainability summit expected next year. We are also talking to the United States for working in third countries or with third countries together and expanding our engagement beyond bilateral to engage with other parts of the world in different areas. For example, whether we could look at the critical minerals in third countries to be jointly worked upon by the US and India, or investments from third countries for joint projects between the US and India. Friends, we also had the 9th CEO Forum, where new dimensions in our business-to-business ties were discussed for collaboration, greater degree of collaboration on technology and investment. We do believe that areas like space, aviation, R&D, health, clean energy are areas where both the US and India have shared interests for the shared benefit of people of both the countries, and for that matter, for all of humanity. The academia-industry partnership, which got a boost with the Honorable Prime Minister having a tech roundtable organized by MIT, also was discussed in length to see how we can work on reskilling and upskilling of technical people to provide the manpower required in the years to come for greater collaboration in AI, machine learning, setting up of data centers in India, and creating investment opportunities in both countries. I think every visit that I come here, the interactions with investors is truly phenomenal. I've met with some of the top bankers, top investment funds, who are large investors in India, some who have very ambitious plans going forward. Each one of them has only reconfirmed to me their investment interests in India. The numbers that they are talking of in the next few years are truly astounding. On a lighter note, one of the large investors was mentioning that they'll soon be completing 20 years of investments in India, and they've been deliberating what would be the best way to celebrate. And they thought the best way to celebrate would be to add a few more $1 billion into the Indian economy. So it just speaks about the attractiveness of the India growth story, the huge opportunities that the 4 Ds that India offers: decisive leadership, demographic dividend from a young population with an average age of 28.4, young aspirational Indians bringing to the table the demand that 1.4 billion Indians generate, and a vibrant democracy, the rule of law, which is very important, particularly in the changing geopolitical environment in the world, and given the risks that the world today recognizes in working with countries which do not have the rule of law and non-discriminatory policies. I think it's been a great America-India relationship in every sense of the term, and I'm sure we'll continue to work together in the years to come with the same spirit of mutual trust that defines this relationship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It's now open for questions. Please, one by one. Yeah.
Hi, Minister. This is Saurabh Shukla. I'm Editor-in-Chief of News Noble. Minister, you're known as a problem solver in the government, whether it's in Rajya Sabha or in the government. You took a major leap forward when we decided to settle our WTO disputes between India and the US. That was a big game-changing thing. As friends, we obviously disagree on certain things. What are the next steps that you're taking to solve any irritants that you may have in the relationship?
Yeah, but let me finish. I think they'll not get the exclusivity. That's very important in the media. I think we have by and large come to a situation where we can work closely together to resolve any issues that may come up. We were trying to take a stock of pending issues, and there are not too many. We have one or two small things to sort out, which in the next trade policy forum we'll sort out. By and large, the groundwork for that also was laid out in today's meeting with USTR. Now we've started looking at a positive engagement rather than a problem-solving engagement. So now we are looking at seeing how we can take proactive measures to take this relationship to the next level. For example, as a case in point, in the WTO, we used to be literally litigious nations, known to be fighting with each other. Now with all the disputes gone, and that has actually become the gold standard in the entire WTO of how a relationship can mature. We are now seeing how we can cooperate with each other in a greater way for the issues before the WTO. So this has now moved to the positive engagement level rather than the problem-solving level.
Minister.
Madam.
Thank you, Minister. Sriram Lakshman from The Hindu. I had a couple of questions. One is, you said you were preparing the groundwork for the next TPF, right? One is understanding that the GSP is not under the purview of the executive but the US Congress, how would you characterize the appetite of the Biden administration in the remaining months to push Congress to get India, to reauthorize the program and then get India back on it? And second question, where does the Social Security totalization discussion stand? India has presented the information that the US wanted last time, I believe, right? So where has that progressed? Thank you.
Well, I think on both these issues, this would not be the appropriate time when they are almost on the cusp of their elections. So ideally, both these issues, to be fair, both these issues were also at least flagged off in today's meeting, which was more of an informal meeting because we are not actually working on an agenda today. But both these issues are right now not on the agenda before USTR or me, and will have to be pursued at another time once there's a new Congress in place. I think we'll have to work with the Ways and Means Committee of the Congress on the GSP. It's sad that when it actually originally happened, at that point of time, the then government did not really take it seriously enough to solve it at that time. But maybe that's destined for another day.
Minister, thank you. This is Reena Bharadwaj from ANI. On the Middle Eastern crisis that's evolving by the time, on energy dependence, where does India really stand, considering, you know, it depends on Iran? How do you see this play out in the coming days?
As things stands today, there is neither a disruption nor a significant price movement. But we have always been very watchful. India has also diversified its sources of energy, and today is quite insulated from any problems that may escalate in the Middle East. I do not think we are dependent on Iran at all
was about to say you need to
For oil.
fact check that part.
Yeah, because of the sanctions, we are not buying oil from Iran at all. So it would not have any impact on the India oil requirements.
Prashant?
So Prashant Jha of the Hindustan Times. Two broad questions. So the first is about whether the US is just an undependable and unreliable trade partner. And I ask you this in the context of the upcoming elections and one of the candidates, Donald Trump, saying that he'll impose a 20% tariff. I also ask you this in the context of a book that Robert Lighthizer wrote, where he called you a smart, gifted politician, but he also called India the most protectionist country in the world, which determines policies based on the interests of 15 oligarchs. So my second question broadly is about manufacturing, which you spoke about just now at CSIS. Why is it that the share of manufacturing in GDP remains around 16, 17% and has remained at that plus minus a little bit for the last 10 years? And what is it that's not, despite all your attempts, we've not been able to leapfrog on that front?
Prashant, no issue. हमको भी कई वर्ष हो गए अभी थोड़ा बहुत हम भी train हो गए. First of all, let me say it on record loud and clear that India looks at the United States of America as one of the most reliable trade partners, an outstanding trade partner with whom we are increasingly expanding our relations and our trade, both in goods, services, technology, investment, in every respect. And we deeply value this relationship. I don't think comments made during an election determine our relations. We have, under the Modi government, had excellent relations with the Obama administration, with the Trump administration, with the Biden administration, and going forward we will continue to have excellent relations with the United States of America, only getting better by the day. Mr. Bob Lighthizer is a very dear friend. We have worked closely together. I had the opportunity to strengthen relations with the USTR when I became Commerce Minister in 2019. We shared a lovely friendship also. As regards tariffs, I think we have had this discussion very often with Bob also in explaining to him that every country protects certain goods, certain items based on their national interest and based on the offensive actions of certain other countries. For example, the United States of America does have an import tariff of probably over 163% on peanut butter. It is a defensive protection that the United States provides to their farmers on peanut butter. Similarly, there are products in India which have zero duty. There are products in India which have low duties of 2.5%, 5%. And there may be a few products which may have certain higher duties. Also, in a MFNized world, most favored nation tax, import duties world, one has to look at what are the countries who are providing products, who are dumping products, who have non-transparent or opaque pricing mechanisms through which they are sending products into India, and protect the domestic manufacturing industries against those indiscriminate imports, often substandard, but irrationally priced. In that situation, the MFN rate applies to all, and some countries may find it hurting them. The best way forward is for us to do a free trade agreement, and that is what India is doing with many countries. We've concluded with the UAE in a record time, the fastest ever concluded FTA ever in history. We have concluded our Ekta agreement with Australia, the second part of which is under active discussion. I've just returned from Australia 2 weeks back. We have concluded an agreement with the EFTA countries, Switzerland, Norway, Liechtenstein, and Iceland. a very powerful agreement, again, a first of its kind in history, where a trade agreement also has an element of $100 billion foreign direct investment commitment linked to the trade benefits given to them. Why I'm sharing all this is that in order to overcome the constraints of MFN-based tariff structure, one has to work for bilateral relationship. One can't have lower taxes for one country and higher for another country other than through this mechanism. Bob understands that very well. I've also been at pains to explain to my counterparts in the United States that should I reduce the import duties on even products of the interests of USA, it'll have to be on an MFN basis. And the benefit won't come to the US, which is already quite high priced in most products. The benefit will be taken by some other third country. So even if my intention is to help America and American businesses, the benefit won't go to them, but may go to other countries. I still remember on a particular product, when there was a demand that we should reduce the import duty on it, and India was willing to do it, the company for whom the duty was to be reduced was the one to come and tell us, please don't reduce it. Because they recognized they had started manufacturing in India, and they realized that any reduction in duty on that product would have killed their manufacturing plans in India, because a third country where that product was being made would have dumped that material into India at very low prices. So the response to the high tariff argument is actually based on the MFN world. And the solution is also available, which I'm sure at some stage the US and India may consider. And lastly, you're forgetting the situation in which Mr. Modi took charge in 2014. We were a fragile five economy. The world had written us off. Inflation was high, interest rates were high, foreign exchange reserves were low, growth was low, mood was low, investor sentiment was poor, the stock markets were down, and all in all, we were considered amongst the weakest currencies, weakest economies of the world. Despite those constraints, with corruption scandals coming out, a diamond doesn't literally from the closet every week, every 15 days before 2014. It was a painstaking task to bring back manufacturing mojo into the country, to bring back investor interest into the country, bring back the image of India as a manufacturing story, get back the economy's macroeconomic fundamentals on track, and look at where we've reached from 14 to 24. We've taken growth up to 8%, from 4% to 8%. Our inflation is down from 9% to under 4%, 3.5%, 3.6%. Our average inflation for 10 years was the lowest in India's history, a decadal 5.25% average inflation is the lowest India has seen in its history for 10 years. Our foreign exchange reserves are a record nearly $700 billion, fourth largest in the world. Stock markets, which reflect the future, usually talk about or value the future, are up 4.5 times, 350% growth from 5,700 in 2014 to 25,000 plus in 2024. Foreign direct investment last 10 years has been twice what it was in the earlier 10 years. In every respect, the India stories come back. But despite 2 years lost in COVID, 2 wars continuing to hurt global growth, India's manufacturing share being maintained at 17% through this period, despite all the negativity which we inherited, all the difficulties in the world economy today, is a matter of great satisfaction. The various initiatives, right from Make in India, which celebrated 10 years last week, to the 20 industrial smart cities, to ease of doing business, reduction in compliance burden, Jan Vishwas Bill, decriminalization of laws, promoting innovation, promoting the GCCs in the country, encouraging manufacturing through production-linked incentives. It's this plethora of actions that has led to India's manufacturing share not falling. Otherwise, with all the inflow of goods coming from non-transparent economies, we could have collapsed in terms of manufacturing. And I must share with you that in many, many sectors, we have been able to actually grow significantly, so that as our GDP grew by 90%, vis-a-vis global growth of GDP by only 35% in the last 10 years, manufacturing also kept pace and has almost doubled in the last 10 years, and therefore been able to maintain, rather grow slightly from 15 to 17%. All the building blocks are in place, and we see the next decade as the growth decade to take our manufacturing share up.
So Palji and then Yashwant and then Seema.
Sukhpal Singh Tanoa from PTC News. My question is possibilities of India-Pakistan trade via Atari and Wagah border. Do you see any possibilities or in geopolitical situation? अगर आप देखते हैं कि कोई रुकावट है उनमें, तो क्या प्लीज़ आप हमारे दर्शकों को बताएंगे कि कौन सी बड़ी वो बातें हैं जिनकी वजह से ये सारा काम रुका हुआ है? थैंक यू.
आप अगर याद करें तो प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जब 2014 में आए, उन्होंने पाकिस्तान के साथ रिश्ते सुधारने का हर संभव कदम उठाया. आप पिछले दिनों में जाएं अगर 14, 15, 16 उन दिनों में, तो प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी ने बड़े खुले दिल से, साफ मन से पाकिस्तान के साथ रिश्ते सुधारने का हर संभव कदम किया. लेकिन अगर पाकिस्तान आतंकवादी गतिविधियों को बंद नहीं करेगा और हमारे देश में आके हमारे नागरिकों के ऊपर आहत पहुंचाएगा, नुकसान पहुंचाएगा, तो स्वाभाविक है कि भारत को जम के उसका मुकाबला करना पड़ेगा. पत्थर का जवाब पत्थर से देना होगा, ईंट का जवाब ईंट से देना होगा. वही हमने किया. हमने चाहे वो सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक हो, चाहे एयर स्ट्राइक्स हो, जब पाकिस्तान ने भारत के ऊपर नुकसान करने का प्रयास किया, हमने उसको जमकर मुकाबला किया. जहाँ तक व्यापार की बात है, ट्रेड रूट्स की बात है, India has not stopped trade with Pakistan. It is Pakistan who has stopped trade with India. And therefore the ball is in their court. भारत एक ऐसा देश है जिसने कभी भी किसी के साथ रिश्ते बिगाड़ने का कोई कदम नहीं उठाया. We are not an expansionist country. We have always believed in dialogue. We have always believed in diplomacy as the solutions for the problems of the world. And we will continue to persevere and make every effort to have dialogue and diplomacy as our tool for global good. पर उसका प्रीकंडीशन जरूर ये है कि आतंकवाद को अगर कोई सहायता दे, आतंकवाद को प्रोत्साहन दे, वो कदापि भारत या भारत के लोग बर्दाश्त नहीं करेंगे.
Yashwant.
Thank you. Minister Yashwant from INS. Two questions. One is about US companies which are shifting their supply chains from China, out of China to other destinations. A recent report by American Chamber in Beijing, in Shanghai, sorry, it said the top destinations are Southeast Asia and Mexico, first and second. Indian subcontinent was the third. And the industry said India is lagging because its capacity for advanced supply chain value additions is lacking. So in your meetings with CEOs in the private sector here, did this come up and were you asked about this, or what's your answer to them? And second, did the Chabahar airport, the port in Iran, Did that come up and the sanctions about it, whether
Actually,
it's
both
covered
these
by-
issues were not raised during any of our meetings with the investors, with CEOs, with manufacturing companies, or with the government. So both issues haven't really figured at all. But as regards the shifting of supply chains from China, we have Apple also as a living example of the growing interests in India. Apple has exported in the first 5 months of this year from from April to July or August, $5 billion worth of smartphones. The expectation this year is to increase exports to probably $15 or $16 billion just by Apple alone. It's a process. I think first certain elements of the manufacturing process move, and then the ecosystem moves, domestic value addition keeps adding, supply chain gets strengthened. As regards the reason why they would have probably shifted to the Southeast Asian region earlier, would have been that after RCEP, Chinese companies have invested in a big way in the ASEAN region. And India does not encourage Chinese investment in India. So that could have been one of the reasons. But more and more democratic world is recognizing that they would like to have their supply chains in geographies which are trusted, where the rule of law prevails, where there is recourse and no discrimination. And therefore, I think the mood of the world is changing, and India is becoming significantly more attractive than any other part of the world for movement of supply chain.
Companies are, American companies invested in China. They are shifting their operations out, not the Chinese companies which are...
That's because the supply chain still comes from China for those products. So some of the American companies may have earlier on chosen to move there, but that's an individual choice which each company has to take. I can only tell you that in our CEO forum, one of the large logistics companies CEO estimated based on the trends that they are seeing and the movement of American companies to other geographies, they are expecting India's share in global manufacturing to double in the next 5 years. This is not my comment, not my statement. This was mentioned by one of the participants in the India-US CEO forum.
Seema?
Seema Siruri, columnist for the Economic Times. Mr. Minister, to press on the question that Sriram asked on the totalization agreement, this issue has been around for a long time. Your government has been in power for 10 years. What kinds of push have you made actually? Okay, so right now is not a good time because this administration is on the cusp of going out. But where is it in your priority list? Because it's a lot of money that goes into the pockets of the US Treasury that should legitimately go to the people who worked here. Second question is about unemployment in India. You know, we hear a lot of good stories about, you know, how everybody thinks amazing things are happening. Then why is it that more jobs are not being created and people are applying for, you know, peons' job, people who have degrees, hundreds of thousands of people are applying. It's really sad to read that. So why is it not happening? All the greatness of the last 10 years
Not a problem.
not translating into jobs.
Happy to respond to it. As regards totalization is concerned, it's unfortunate that this was a subject which should have been sorted out many, many, many decades ago, when the numbers were small and when the impact was manageable. Over a period of time, this was neglected by several governments in India. And therefore, now the dimension of the amount and the dimension of the money collected by the treasury is so large that for any government, this will be a major decision. However, after Mr. Modi came in, and we saw a significant improvement in the relationship. We have had a number of dialogues around totalization. I remember towards the end of the Trump administration also, the USTR, then USTR was tasked with studying this issue. Subsequently, when the Biden administration came in, we have been having dialogue with them. They had sent us certain very detailed questionnaires about the social security systems in India, which have all been responded to. The social security coverage details that we have shared with them cover about 930 million people in India, more than the required threshold. So we are eligible for a dialogue and a resolution of totalization and bringing in a social security agreement. But it's a subject that has festered for far too long and is not going to get resolved overnight, as you rightly pointed out, particularly in a government that's waiting for the elections to happen. So we'll continue to have this dialogue with the United States, and something which is not easy anywhere in the world. We'll have to work this way through. It's going to take time. We recognize that. As regards unemployment in India, I think you might have missed some of the most recent surveys and some of the most recent inputs that we are getting from industry, from farmers, from different sections of society. The periodic labor force survey data shows unemployment to be at its lowest currently. Across the country, businesses and industries are crying for people. Larsen and Toubro CEO is on record to say that he's looking for 45,000 people for L&T's infra division alone. And when I last met him and asked reconfirmation of that number, he said, no, it's not only 45,000. I need another 25,000 for my technology, IT company. So there's demand for a lot of people to work. Sadly, the example that you gave of people with degrees applying for jobs is because a lot of people believe a government job is a job, everything else is work. And I think that is changing with our young men and women gradually with higher levels of education and degrees working in the private sector, recognizing that merit is getting rewarded. Our startups, we have 140,000 startups creating millions of jobs. Our innovators coming up with more than 108 or 110 unicorns in India now, the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. So the narrative and the young men and women's thinking is changing. But there's still a very large section who would still like to apply for a government job as and when the opportunity comes. The point you're making about degree holders applying for a peon's job or stuff like that relates to a very traditional thinking where people saw job security in a government job, or they saw the fact that there'll be, irrespective of work or no work, you're secure. So merit never was their priority, just a secure job was the priority. There are many people who intrinsically want to be in the government, and there's no harm in that. All of them are working in the government also. In a way, directly, indirectly, I'm working in the government today, though by choice, and because the people have chosen us. Similarly, there's that traditional thinking. Some people think that if they get a government job, it'll be good for, marriage prospects and all that. We are all aware of all of this, Seema. So I think the thinking is going to change, but there are a lot of people who may be in another job, who may be working in the private sector. But whenever a government job opportunity comes up, they'll apply. Tukka lag gaya, in case ho gaya, to let's get into that job. So in fact, I believe it may be at some point very interesting to do a survey. Maybe the press could do it. It's not something the government would be doing. To check that when somebody applies for a job in the government, which often gets blown out of proportion, that so many people applied for so few jobs. How many of those were really without a job? And how many of those were working in some other job, but still wanted to give a shot at getting a government job? Incidentally, the unemployment rate, which has been continuously decreasing, in 22-23 was 3.2%. This is a decrease from 6.1% for males and 5.6% for females in 17-18. So it's a continuously decreasing figure. But everybody has a choice whether they want to consider their work as a job or they want to consider only a government job. Some senior political leaders are also a part of the narrative where they talk only of government as a job. And I don't know how everybody can be taken in by that narrative.
Let's go round by.
I wouldn't have that amount.
Let's go round by round.
I wouldn't have that amount.
Lalit.
Thank you, sir. Lalit Jha from PTI, Press Trust of India. Among the several cabinet-level officials that have visited from India in the last 1.5 months, beginning with Defense Minister, one of them was leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi. While his visit was overshadowed by his remarks on Sikhism, assault on journalists, but I would like to draw your attention towards his comments on manufacturing. He spoke at length in his interaction with the students at the Georgetown University, at the National Press Club, the think tanks, and in his address to the Indian diaspora as well. According to him, one of the reasons why China has evolved as a manufacturing hub of the world is because of countries like US and India, which let them grow at that. He also felt that Modi government has not done enough in manufacturing sector, and this is the reason why there are large-scale job losses. He also met few illegal immigrants from India, from Haryana in particular, which he has been speaking in this election campaign. I would like to have your reaction to that. And also, since he spoke about manufacturing at length, Congress party is in power in several states. How do you see Congress parties in those states, their manufacturing policies?
Well, I can only sympathize for the lack of knowledge about the India manufacturing story, because I don't know which are those job losses he's talking about. But we are on a foreign soil. We are not like Mr. Rahul Gandhi, who bring domestic politics to foreign lands. He's entitled to berate his own country. That's a matter of his choice. As far as we are concerned, all of India is united in its effort to improve the prosperity of our people. We are all working towards a developed nation, a prosperous nation by 2047. Viksit Bharat 2047 is our goal, our vision, our mission, our commitment, and we are all together in making the lives of the people of India better in the years to come. As regards China, it's very sad that some people possibly responsible for the growing influence of China in the India industry are choosing to continue to praise or defend the China story. Whereas the whole world today recognizes that China is a non-transparent and opaque economy. China is known to dump goods. Even the US is concerned about it. The US is imposing extra taxes and duties on Chinese goods. US is concerned about security threat from Chinese goods and imposing restrictions on that. Whereas if you look back, and I'm only giving this as a matter of statistics with no intention to politicize, India only had a trade deficit of about $1.7 or $1.8 billion in 2004 with China. What happened between 2004 and the next 2 or 3, 4 years is something for the press to find out. But between 2004 to 2014, our trade deficit went up from $1.8 billion to $43 billion in 10 years. by nearly 30 times. Now, it is a matter of shame that we allowed Chinese goods, substandard goods, opaquely priced goods, non-transparent, costed goods to flood the Indian markets, to kill Indian manufacturing, to almost get investors disinterested in the India story because there was no protection against these kind of goods coming in from China. Import duties were reduced during that period. India, which was not a part of RCEP, was taken into RCEP forcibly, which was really getting India to do an FTA with China. If you look back, what was RCEP? There's a grouping of 15 countries. India already had an FTA with the 10 ASEAN countries. We already had an FTA with Japan, already had an FTA with Korea. So 12 out of those 15 countries, we already had an FTA. With Australia, we were at an advanced stage of negotiation, even at that time. But we aborted it because we thought we'll do and get into RCEP. With New Zealand, our total trade was $300 million. So at that point of time, 300 million is what, about 3,000, no, not even 1,000 crores, 1,500 crores roughly. 1,500 crore was the total trade with New Zealand. Reh kaun gaya 15 mein? Only China. And those 15 were merrily doing an agreement. India was forced to join that group into RCEP by an executive action of the then government. At the highest level, there's a what is that called? TERC is a body led by the Prime Minister which takes these decisions. They forced India into the RCEP negotiation. So you will all appreciate it basically was getting India to do an FTA with China. And imagine what that would have cost India. Look at the import duties, how they have been reduced from 4 to 14, which helped China dump goods into India. And for your information, our trade deficit increased from 4 to 14 at a compounded annual growth rate of 42.85%. CAGR of 42.85%. If that did not kill manufacturing, what did? Whereas from 14 to 24, our trade deficit with China grew only by 6.45%, CAGR of 6.4. It's chalk and cheese. And this is compounding, by the way. So whereas trade deficit in 10 years in our time barely doubled, it grew by 30 times, 3,000% in those 10 years. I think it's extremely sad that certain countries, certain governments who are responsible for this problem in the first place don't even recognize and understand how they have hurt and damaged the India growth story. Anyway, that is for our domestic politics. Over here, I can only tell you, all of us are unitedly working for the collective good of 140 crore Indians.
I think we'll need to put a close on this because Minister has a journey to do and a train to catch. But thank you very much for coming out this evening. Thank you very much.
And thank you for really some wonderful questions.
Thank you.
Enjoyed
Thank you.
interacting with
Thank
all
you.
of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.